How are you guys feeling? Who do you guys want to see go number one?
I'm feeling excited. We did this last year, and we got to see a historic event take place when the Wemby sweepstakes ended up going to San Antonio. And to continue the Wemby legacy, I wouldn't mind another lucky outing for San Antonio.
Yeah, I'm definitely wouldn't mind seeing San Antonio get the first pick. I'm also slightly rooting for Memphis. I kind of want to see them get the first, just to see what they would do with it.
I'm cheering for San Antonio right now. All right, let's see what we got.
All right,
And good
let's
luck,
get right
everyone.
into it with Mark Tatum.
The 14th pick in the 2024 NBA Draft, presented by State Farm, will be made by the Portland Trailblazers.
As expected, Portland receives this pick from Golden State, who could only have kept this pick if it had landed in the top 4.
The 13th pick belongs to the Sacramento Kings.
Look at Keegan.
Picking
just-
12th
He
will
looks
be
so mad.
the Oklahoma City Thunder.
This also expected.
Still
OKC
insane
receives
that they
this
did
pick
the
from
lottery.
Houston due to the Russell Westbrook-Chris Paul trade.
The 11th pick in the NBA Draft will go to the Chicago Bulls.
Okay. Julian Phillips represent.
Pick number 10 will be
So
made by
impressed.
the Utah Jazz.
This
Is
means
everything
that
up to kinda
Atlanta and
expectations right now?
Houston have both moved
Yeah, like
into the
the-
top 4. You see those
Wow.
smiles.
Atlanta and Houston, they said.
The 9th pick goes to
Oh,
the Memphis Grizzlies.
Oh, that's rough. That's probably too far for Klingon.
The 8th pick will be made by
I think they'd probably trade that pick.
the San Antonio Spurs.
Spurs. That's the Raptors pick.
That's a big
So
move
San
up, isn't it?
Antonio receives this pick due to the
Or a decent
Jakob
one?
Poeltl trade. Had the pick remained in the top 6, it would have
That
stayed
just
with
means the
Toronto.
Raptors lose their pick.
The 7th
If I
pick
was
in the
Raptors fan,
NBA
I'd be
Draft
throwing
belongs to the Portland Trailblazers.
So
This means that San
7 to
Antonio
14.
has also moved into the top 4.
Oh, Brody.
Wow.
Oh, top 4 Spurs.
Pick number
Are they
6
gonna get
goes
number
to
one?
Oh my God.
the Charlotte Hornets.
Hornets get 6.
The 5th pick will be made by the Detroit Pistons.
Wow.
Wow.
Another fall to
So that means
5.
Wizards are going to be in the.
Unbelievable. Already
He
some
can't even keep-
wrinkles. We've got our 4.
So let's do winners and losers for 14 through 5.
Definitely the Raptors.
Yeah, that has to hurt. Like,
Raptors as the losers.
Yeah.
Losing out on that pick.
They
No lottery pick for Toronto, and that's a rough look for a team that we're going to talk about in a little bit, but they are really in need of a kind of a game-changing pick.
Yeah, they sucked all year, and now to have no first round pick, it's just now I think they have to turn to free agency, and I don't know because quickly should be coming up here soon. They have some decisions to make there in Toronto.
Yeah. We'll get into it a little bit more in our preview, but I think another interesting thing to note is that the Hawks also have a top 4 pick. Obviously, they have been a team that's been mediocre for a little while, and they have a lot of question marks surrounding not only Trae Young, but DeJounte Murray as well. This class probably isn't the most ideal in terms of talent at the top, but for the Hawks, it'll be interesting to see what they try to do with that and if they can salvage anything out of that to try and move the needle.
Yeah, especially because at that like 3, 4, 5, like it's all projected to be guards right there.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of makes you think like, is this the year you move on from Trae Young? Like
Go
you have
replace him with like a Dillingham
or
Shepherd.
Shepherd. Like you have a guarantee, more than likely there'll be a guard somewhere around the spots you're picking. If you like one of them enough, is your team better with taking someone maybe who's less talented than one of the guards? Or is it better taking one of the guards and trading the 2 you have now and just building around them?
Yeah, because that's a hypothetical, but if they go and get a guard, and we'll see how high up in this lottery they get in the top 4 reveal, but if they end up taking like a Rob Dillingham and move DeJounte Murray or Trae Young, they could probably get a lot of draft capital in that trade, and all of a sudden they're turning into similar to like what the Thunder are doing, where they would just continue to add young players and get draft capital. So could be really interesting.
Yeah, I would say another loser would be Memphis. I was really hoping they would get high enough to probably get Clingan. I think at 9, that's probably be a little too late. I think it's likely now they probably trade that pick.
And if you could get a guy like Clingan, I know one of the reasons why they were such a good team before was because of the presence of Steven Adams. And I remember when they traded him, it was kind of a shock. And a guy like Clingan, he does a lot of the same things, and he has the potential to be an even better prospect. So when you miss out on a guy like that, it's kind of tough. And especially with the Grizzlies, they're kind of in a weird timeline compared to some of these other teams, because obviously they have Ja Morant and they have supplemental pieces around him to make them a real competitor. But it'll be interesting to see if they trade or if they go ahead and draft somebody here.
And the trade thing is interesting too, because this isn't a very strong class. So, in order to trade, you need a trade partner. And I don't know if there are going to be many teams willing to go to number 9 to move with Memphis. Maybe a team like Toronto, after losing their pick in the lottery, maybe they're a team that's just desperate enough to get at some of that top 10 young talent. If somebody starts to slide and they can put some sort of package together with Memphis. But yeah, that's a really rough spot for a team that probably would have been close to the postseason if not for all the Ja Morant situations.
Yeah, I think if I'm the Grizzlies, I'm just praying one of the higher name guys, like some of the guys that teams are either all in or all out on, slides a little bit. Because then if you can just get the right team to love a guy that you have the chance to pick at 9, then you get a little more value out of it. But as it stands now, it's just a really tough spot because outside of Clingan, Sarr is also probably likely to be gone there. And then I think after those two, there's probably a really big drop-off in big talent. Someone else who might have lost this too is the Pistons. Like, to be that historically bad and then not get a top 4 pick, it's tough. Like, now you miss out on guys like Reese say, like, you're probably going to have to settle for the second or third best wing instead of getting the one you really want. But, like, maybe try to get another
number 1 pick in
2025
this
one.
year's NBA draft. Will it be Washington? Will it be San
I feel like it's
Antonio,
gonna be
who already has a top 10 pick?
I feel like it,
Will
too.
it be Houston or will it be Atlanta?
Houston getting a
Joining us
first
once
round-
again to
first
announce the
overall
order
pick
of the
here
top
would be
4
huge,
picks,
too, 'cause
NBA
they
Deputy
don't need
Commissioner and
anything.
Chief Operating Officer
go.
Mark Tatum.
Thanks again, El. The 4th pick in the NBA draft goes to the San Antonio Spurs.
Okay. 4.
They couldn't give him too much.
The 3rd pick belongs to
The Wizards.
the Houston Rockets.
Okay.
I don't want it to go to the Wizards, but
I think he's going to the Wizards.
The 2nd pick will be made by the Washington
Whoa.
Wizards.
Whoa.
And that means that the number 1 pick in the 2024 NBA draft goes to the Atlanta Hawks.
Okay.
Alex.
Hawks.
Wow, an absolute stunner. The Atlanta Hawks with the second lowest
Man.
pre-draft
I'm speechless,
position
I don't
to
know.
end up with the number 1
What
pick.
does this
they
mean?
have never won the lottery before.
I know we were
That's
just
crazy. Never won the lottery before.
I know we were just talking about them like maybe taking a guard, but I think with the first pick, it changes a lot because now do you keep Trae Young in DeJounte and then you maybe decide to move on from Capella for like a Sarr or a Clingan? Or,
This is such a volatile draft. I mean, it's going to be all over the place.
And for like how many questions that there are about the top of this class and like who could actually go number 1 now that it's Atlanta too, like unless they do a pre-draft trade where it's pretty certain, okay, they made this trade because this is what they're doing. If they kind of keep it silent going to draft night, it's going to be absolutely crazy to know what's
mayhem.
going on.
if I'm the Hawks, I don't know what I'd do here. Like, now it's the Trae Young thing is really on the clock now because it's, do we move on from Trae Young and DeJounte? And I think it'll come down to whether or not they think there's a superstar in this class. Like, if they can find someone that they believe can carry the franchise, like if they really sold on Dillingham or if they really buy into like Alexander Sarr or someone, maybe I would look into trading one of them. But I don't know. It's hard because the guys at the top of the draft aren't necessarily fits with Atlanta's roster as currently constructed. Like, they have wings, they have a big, They have plenty of guards. Like, this is a team that really shouldn't have been as bad as they were this year. So if you're the GM, what do you do? Like, is it time to blow it up?
I think one of the biggest things is Washington getting in that top 2, because this is a roster that they traded Porzingis to Boston going into last year. They don't have Daniel Gafford anymore, and they pretty much don't have that, well-known, like, this is our center, this is our kind of rim protector. And I feel like getting inside that top 2 where they could guarantee themselves either Alex Sarr or Donovan Clingan, that could be a huge thing for them, because their defense was so bad. It was literally the worst in points allowed in the Eastern Conference. So I feel like adding some sort of rim protection in there would be massive for the Wizards.
There's just like the smallest part of me that I would just really like to see Dillingham and Poole next to each other. Like, I know it would be lots of Shaq in the full moments. Crazy, but I just feel like if it worked, like if they somehow figured out a way to make that work, they would have one of the most entertaining teams, at least in the league.
I know Cameron mentioned it earlier too, but I think the Rockets having the 3rd pick, that's a pretty interesting revelation, because they didn't make the play-on, but they still took a considerable leap compared to last year. And they have Jabari Smith, Alperen Sengun, Jalen Green. There's still kind of a question mark about like what he's going to be long-term, but they have some good young pieces, and that's not even mentioning Amin Thompson. So I'm kind of curious to see if they will try to draft here, or if they'd be looking to try and get something out of it. But at the same time, we've said it before, there's just not a lot of high value with these picks because of the makeup of this class. But I'm kind of intrigued by that Rockets pick.
But at 3, I feel like there has to be a team out there that either really loves Dillingham or really loves Shepherd, or is in love with like a Jacoby Walter or a Tyler Smith or someone. Like, I just feel like at 3, while it might not be as, like, it's not your normal top 3 pick value, but I think it should be similar to like a top 10 pick in other years. Mm-hmm. And like, that's still like a good piece that you could add via the trade market. Or like, if, like you said, if they keep the pick, where do they go? Because they're another team that has like, they have everything, but it's just a matter of them getting better as a team. Like, what would be the missing piece for them?
Yeah, I would think in terms of most need and biggest question marks is probably that small forward position, just because like you're not going to replace Jalen Green in this class at all. He's what you're hoping is your building block for the future. Obviously, Brandon, you mentioned with like Jabari Smith and Alperen Sengun, so most of that front court is kind of filled up. But do you take a shot at maybe a Zach Risache and hope that even more length like that in the front court could provide some pretty insane defensive like switchability and just overall versatility defensively? That could be a ridiculously young starting 5. I think all of them would be like less than 24, maybe 25 years old. I don't know how old Sengun is. I'm pretty sure he's still pretty young. But that would be crazy. I mean, they're literally building the next Oklahoma City Thunder at this point with how young they are.
Another dude I forgot about too, he missed a large portion of the second half of the season, but they also have Tari Eason too, and he's a pretty good defender. Also Cam Whitmore. Like, it's just they have an abundance of young guys right now. Now the question is, obviously, long term, most of those guys probably aren't going to be there, so it's just a question of which ones do you guys see a future with? And even then, some of those guys haven't really been there long enough to kind of really decide if this is the guys that you want to have long term. So I think they have a lot of decisions to make. It'll be interesting to see, even if they do make the draft pick and then just trade it later on. But yeah, also the Spurs having the 4th and 8th pick, that isn't something that should be overlooked either.
Because I think if they, I know it's against like Spurs, like what they do as a team, but they kind of look like a trade-up target to me. Like, they look like someone that if they fell in love with, let's say, drafting Donovan Clingan, or they really love Zachary Richardson, like he played with Wembanyama on the foreign team, I'm pretty sure. So if they really want someone, would they package 4 and 8 to go up and get it? Or if they don't like anyone at 4, if let's say they like Ricochet and Dillingham and they go 1 and 3, do they trade out of 4 and 8 and just try to stack as many 2025 picks as you can, since we know that class is supposed to be one of the better ones?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, I think I have a game we should play. So we can go through a couple teams, and I'll give you guys a scenario, and you tell me what you would do as a GM. So you guys are the Houston Rockets. Zachary Ricochet went number 2, and Donovan Clingan went 1. Who do you take? Or do you trade the pick?
That's tough. I mean, I feel like those would probably be, especially Ricochet. And I know you bring up Cam Whitmore, which is a really good point, and how he could fill in that 3rd spot. Obviously, he was just a rookie last year, so he's still got a ton of potential to be that starting 3 going forward. But if the Rockets during the pre-draft, they really like Ricochet, I feel like Cam Whitmore is someone who some of these other teams would look at as a trade piece with a ton of value, and it would help maybe bring in another veteran that's a game changer, either off the bench or even in the starting lineup. But it's just such an awkward spot for them, because in theory they have so many spots in their starting lineup like set, and they're pretty much just waiting on development. So if they don't have what they like there, I don't mind them either trading down a little bit, maybe to Portland if they really like someone at 7 and 14, you get those 2 picks. Or even trading out of the lottery if they're going to add maybe a veteran for the bench.
I'm kind of torn here. I think I'm going to, just to add some, contrast, I'll go with the pick. But I'm kind of torn because Sengun, although he's very good offensively, in terms of that front court defensively, he's kind of a liability. So part of me wants to say Sarr, but at the same time, you have other guys like Smith. I mentioned Eason. You have guys who can defend. So I think I'm kind of leaning more towards you'd go probably a guard, especially with the questions surrounding Jalen Green. I think this is also partly just because I think it would be fun to kind of watch. But if you added Dillingham to the mix and he's kind of playing, I don't know if you'd start him in or start Dillingham and have a men come off the bench.
I think you probably start Van Fleet still.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you have him on the... But, like, going forward long term, I think I'd probably have Dillingham just as a kind of off-the-bench scorer. Plus, I think that he probably has the highest ceiling of all the other guards in this class, so...
Yeah, I think if I was the Rockets in that scenario, I would... If I didn't trade the pick, I think I would go Reed, just because I think he's someone who needs the ball a little bit less, and I think you already have to feed Jalen Green. You have to get Sengun the ball. Like, I think he's someone who can distribute the ball, and like he can get his without necessarily needing to like go out of his way to create for himself. So that's something interesting. Another thing with that, what I will watch for is if they really like Clingan or Sarr. Sengun has a lot of value around the league. And if you really believe in that stretch that came at the end of the season from Jalen Green, do you shop Sengun here and start looking at maybe getting like a really all-star level player back?
I mean, I would say there's a lot of people who think Sengun is the best player on the Rockets in terms of just every single thing he contribute. Obviously, rebounds, operating out of the post, playing at the basket. But like you said, that would be a lot of trade value. He's kind of known as like the Joker light version. So most teams would add him and he could fit into pretty much every system. But I feel like trading him at this early in his career just to draft another guy would be a huge risk. And I feel like a lot of Rockets fans would not want them to do that.
I think if anyone's going to get traded, it's probably going to be Jalen Green, realistically.
Even after the stretch he had at the end of the year?
That's the thing, though, because I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about whether March and April are really serious
like
indicators of I personally, I still think there's some potential with Jalen Green, but because I know there were times last year before that stretch, he wasn't even finishing games, like not even just because he couldn't score, but like on the other side of the ball, he wasn't really contributing much. And it just really depends. Sengun, I feel like the more I'm thinking about it, I feel like he's just not the guy you'd want to trade. Because even with Green doing well, a lot of that happened while Sengun was out, so he had to take up more of a load. And if Sengun's the guy that they're going to rely on, I feel like we'll kind of see Green kind of regress back to what we saw before if things stayed the same. So I don't know. I feel like they might test the market with Green.
I think that's interesting because they're different players. I think Jalen Green is a little bit more of a dynamic scorer than this guy. But when the Knicks traded R.J. Barrett at the trade deadline, I know a lot of Knicks fans were pretty upset that they gave up on their third pick a few years ago now, who had some pretty decent potential still. And now you look at that move and the Knicks, making these moves in the postseason with OG Anunoby and Jalen Brunson. Maybe the Rockets look at a thing like that and say, hey, yeah, Jalen Green is a good scorer for us. He's got potential. But if we have the opportunity to add someone to this team that is a known quantity, that is like a proven winner, maybe they do make a move like that, especially because Jalen Green is probably their next like big contract coming up. And if they want to avoid potentially making a huge commitment to a guy that they're not super set on, maybe they do end up potentially trading Jalen Green, and we have a huge move this offseason with the Rockets.
Yeah, I think the most likely thing what NBA GMs do a lot is they're going to wait and see. Like, they're going to take the year, they're going to kind of punt on this conversation probably until next offseason, maybe the trade deadline. But I just think it's interesting because, like, I get what you guys are saying with Jalen Green. Like, we don't know if that stretch was really him or if that was just late in the season, had some bad teams they play against in there. But it's just, to me, if I was a GM, I would be looking at, okay, which team do I want to build and what fits better with the rest of my roster? Like, what is out there for each player? Like, if you can turn Jalen Green into like a Mikal Bridges, then maybe. But I think if you could turn Sengun into like, I don't know, just maybe like a Miles Turner and something else from the Pacers. Like, if you can turn, that might not be the best trade, but like if you can turn him into like a person who's like a fringe all-star that fits with the roster you have. Because I think Sengun, while he's a great player, I think the Rockets are kind of built like a really fast, athletic team that I would like to see kind of fly and get into early offense a little more. And when you have to feed it to him in the post, I don't know. It's a good balance, but it's kind of like slowing Jalen Green down, I think. So I think it's at the end of the day, they'll have to decide which player has the higher ceiling.
I was actually going to bring that up too, because another thing with the Rockets is that after Sengun was out, they were able to play more of that up-tempo style. And there were even interviews of Jalen Green talking about how it was like mid-season, but he was talking about how there were times where he felt like the team just needed to run faster. And obviously when they started doing that, it was more advantageous for him. But like you said, I think it also just comes down to them choosing the style of play that they want to win or want to try to win with. It'll be interesting to see. Long term, though, I do agree they'll probably wait. They probably won't overreact in the offseason, but that will be an interesting storyline to follow, especially with all the young pieces that they have.
Okay, second scenario. You're the Spurs, and Riche is gone, Klingon is gone, and Sarr is gone. So you have Dillingham still there.
Basically all the guards.
Yeah, all the guards, Reed, Dillingham at forward. But you have a trade on the table. A team like, let's say, the Raptors have offered you next year's pick. I don't know if they have next year's pick, but like a team that you project to be pretty bad offers you next year's pick for number 4. What do you do?
Just number 4?
just number 4. You don't have to give up 8, so you can still get someone at 8. But it's kind of like your fan base is kind of going to want you to add someone here.
Right.
So you have, and Dillingham's kind of like a fan favorite. So it's like you're punting on someone who's people would love to see you draft, but you get another shot at in 2025.
It's a tough question too, because I mean, theoretically, the Spurs, even just after one offseason, if they don't add somebody in the top 5, they could just be good enough where their own pick in next year's lottery is too good to get some of those guys that they're, considered game-changing, franchise-changing, like if they were to get a Dylan Harper next year somehow. So you almost have to think maybe adding another team's pick that would have a better chance of getting in that top 3 could be beneficial. But at the same time, basically saying we're going to try our best to be bad for another year with Wemby probably is not going to go over well with him. So if you think Dillingham is a good enough player that could play with Wemby and be that Robin to Victor's Batman, I wouldn't mind them declining that trade offer and picking their litter of the guards.
I feel like you kind of have to take the pick here. Kind of like Jake mentioned, you don't know for sure if you'll still be bad enough to where you can get high in next year's class. But I feel like you probably want to go with either Dillingham, and there's a part of me that also still thinks Topic could be a good fit here, even if you don't draft him. I really feel like any guard selection you make with the guys that are in this class, I think the guards in this class have never really been the issue. The main thing is just that they're undersized. But getting someone who's complimentary next to Wemby and can kind of initiate or just be kind of another scorer, you've got Dillingham. Even Reed Shepherd, I feel like, would be a decent fit because he also has he's just an efficient player, and I think that's something that the Spurs would really like. Topic, he's not necessarily the same scorer that they are, but he's a pretty good playmaker. But I think you'd have to go Dillingham just because the past few weeks, I think I've just become a lot higher on him than I was before. Just because the spacing that he provides and the shot creation is just, it's elite. Like, we're not going to see something like that for who knows how many years. But I think any of the guards, really, you can't go extremely wrong with.
So you guys all know I'm a really big Dillingham guy. Like, I had him first on my first big board. But just to play devil's advocate, to be honest, I would really consider the trade. Like, if I can get a 2025 first, which I don't know, to be fair, I don't know how many teams are actually offering like a 2025 first for a 2024 first, just with the difference of classes. But let's say it's like a mid pick. Like, let's say you're confident that it'll be a lottery pick. It won't be like a top 5, but let's say it'll be a 13. Like, if you look at next year's class, like, that could still get you someone that's like comparable to a Dillingham or someone like in the top 4 of this draft. So I would consider it for that reason. And then I think it also gives you the freedom to mess with your pick for next year. So, like, I could trade out, get the pick for next year, and trade my next year's pick, and then really start to go after it, in a sense. Like, you can make a push to be good, so you don't have to tank for your pick necessarily, because you have a pick that you know will be a decent pick, or you assume will be. So I think that would be an interesting way for them to hedge their bet, and they still have the 8th pick. So if they could walk away from this draft with Jacoby Walter and, let's say, maybe who's a mid, like a VJ Edgecombe or someone from next year's draft, and you traded your next year's first for someone like a Trae Young or Brandon Ingram or somebody like that, like, I think that would be interesting. I think that might be a way I would consider going.
I feel like just this whole conversation is just showing how crazy we expect at least the top probably 10 would be in this lottery based on this order. And I mean, shout out to the Atlanta Hawks. They had won their lottery for the first time in 49 years with just 3% chance to get that number 1 pick, which is one of the smallest odds to ever win the number 1 pick in the lottery. So that kind of wraps up our reaction, but what a crazy finish to the 2024 lottery.
And stay tuned for a Hawks draft breakdown, because that pick is going to be electric. Whether it happens or not, we don't really know, but